So welcome everybody to this webinar. So my name is Marine. I'm here with Tina and we will be your hosts for today. This webinar is proposed to you by Women in Digital Switzerland. So for those who do not know Women in Digital, if we have some first timers here, we are an organization which aims at building a community of women working in the world of digital across Switzerland. We organize moment of exchange, giving women the opportunity to, and men as well, actually, not only women, the opportunity to share their knowledge, their network, their experience. And we try to facilitate women access to leadership positions and opportunity to speak up in the world of digital. You can get yourself up to date with our initiatives by following us on LinkedIn, on Facebook, or by joining our meetup group. Today, we have the great pleasure to welcome Angélique, who is a digital change consultant at Atos and will introduce us to the power of people in digital transformation. Angélique has been working for Atos Switzerland for 2 years now, and she belongs to the youngest talents of her company. By inviting her to discuss the nowadays very relevant topic of change management, we don't only want to offer you the opportunity to learn how to successfully lead people towards change. We also hope to raise some awareness and remind, if needed, that being young does not mean that you cannot do a fantastic job. Being junior does not mean that people cannot learn from you. And having a fresh experience does not mean that you cannot be an expert in your field. And Angélique is the absolute proof of that. I will let Angélique show you how. Angélique, if you want, you can now introduce yourself. I will leave you the floor. Perhaps you also want to start after a short introduction by explaining a little bit how this meeting is going to be interactive and how people will be able to get engaged and participate actively.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Marine, for the introduction. And thanks, Tina and Marine, for having me at this first virtual Lunch and Learn session. So I'm going to start sharing my screen, and maybe you can just tell me whether it's working. So you should now see my first slide pretty much.
Yes.
Everything's fine. Perfect.
Perfect.
Yes.
So before introducing myself, I actually already want to use the power of people in this call. And that's why I ask you all to join a so-called mentee. I believe that you can best learn through co-creating and through discussing. And that's why I'm using a tool called Menti. That's a live polling, a live survey tool. All the answers that you put in will stay anonymous, and you can join the Menti either by scanning the code, the QR code with your smartphone camera, or by opening up a new tab in your browser on your computer, going to menti.com and typing in the code that you can see here. It's 3215888. You'll also be able to ask questions at any time in the Menti. So ideally, I ask you to put in your questions there instead of the questions and answers functionality that you find within Zoom. But if somebody puts questions in there, Marine and Tina, I hope you can help me to keep up with that. Otherwise, ideally, I'll put your questions in the Menti.
Sure.
All right. So now I'll actually introduce myself. And no worries, you can join the Menti at any time. You'll still have the possibility just in case it didn't work now. All right. Usually when meeting people for the first time, you are asking them something like, yeah, what's your name? And after a few seconds, you ask them, and what are you doing? But me, I want to ask differently, and I also want to introduce myself differently. I ask the question, what do you love doing? Because usually then people's eyes start to glow and you really get to know them instead of just hearing what they do. If you ask me what I do, I will probably say, I'm a psychologist, I'm a change manager, I'm working in digital transformation projects. But if you ask me what I love doing, I say, I love helping people embrace change. I love to take them with me on a journey towards doing things differently. And the great thing in my work for me to see is people realizing that change can be positive and really taking an active role in it. Besides that, I love the mountains, as you can see here. That's in Gantrisch, actually. So I love hiking, ski touring, as well as climbing, because standing on top of a mountain just gives me the feeling of how small I am in comparison to the universe, right? So that's definitely my balance in life. Because I've introduced myself now, I want to know the same of you. And for that, I'm going to the Menti. That's the first Menti we're going to try. So you should now see in your open tab or on your phone in Menti the question, what do you love doing? And I ask you to just put in the things that you love doing professionally or in your private life, whatever you love doing. And if you haven't yet joined the Menti, just go to menti.com and type in the code that you can see on top of my screen. Dancing. Oh, we have a couple of ones dancing. That's nice. Helping employees get less stress in their work life. Traveling and reading. It's really nice. By the way, you should, of course, like you're switching kind of between the Menti and my shared screen, and you should also see my video. There is, I think, a little navigation pane where you can minimize the video or change the way the video is shown. So just experiment with it a bit to have a look at the screen and the video at the same time. Hiking with my dog. Oh, we have another ski tourer here. Nice. Yoga, rowing. Making digital work as easy as possible. That I love doing as well. Yeah, helping internal business truly adopting and using technology. We'll likely talk about that today. We already even have 65 people in the Menti. So just in case you have problems joining the Menti, just let us know in the chat. Otherwise, you'll always see the code on top of the screen. Awesome. With that, let me go to the actual topic of today. I said I love to make people embrace change, and I want to talk about change today, more specifically about digital transformation. In 2019, we know that 1.3 trillion US dollars were spent on digital transformation initiatives, and COVID-19 is certainly just accelerating this trend. At the same time, we know that unfortunately only 70% of digital transformation initiatives reach their goals. No, 70% actually don't reach their goals. Only 30% reach their goals. And I'll tell you why that is today. Because digital transformation is not about technology. Technology holds the potential for added business value and other benefits, but it doesn't directly translate into this added value. Technology will only show the added business value once the changes are put into practice. And who puts the changes into practice? It's people. So what I'm telling you today is that digital transformation is not about technology, but digital transformation is about managing change. From studies, we know that projects with excellent change management in comparison to poor change management are 6 times more likely to meet or exceed their project objectives. And today, I want to talk about what excellent change management really is And I want to equip you with the techniques and tools that you need to make changes more successful, even if you're not a change manager yourself. But I'm actually interested who maybe is a change manager, him or herself. That's why I'm asking another mentee question. So I'd like you to put in how much you already know about change management. And that's only for me to see kind of who I'm talking to, as in a virtual space. I cannot see you, I cannot really meet you. And that's interesting to see. Okay, so we got 3 change managers so far. Few that don't really know what change management is. Lots of people work together with change managers. That's great. All right, so I can see we have a few change managers. We have a few that have never heard of it, but most of you know a bit about it, or they even work together with change managers. Maybe today's session even helps you to better collaborate with change managers on your team. And in the beginning of my session, I told you that I believe we can best learn if we co-create and if we discuss. So I will now just put us all in a team and give us an assignment. And the assignment is to make all the current COVID-19 restrictions end as quickly as possible by promoting the Swiss COVID app, our contact tracing app. Just in short, for those who don't know what the Swiss COVID app is, or who are maybe joining from other countries, the Swiss COVID app is a contact tracing application that can be installed on your smartphones, and it registers the contacts that you have via Bluetooth anonymously and stores them so that if someone else gets infected, you are notified that you need to isolate, or you yourself can also put in a code to notify others about your infection. And this way we can stop the spreading of COVID-19. This app was issued by the Federal Office of Health in Switzerland and co-developed with universities in Switzerland, but also with private organizations. You do not need to know any technical details about the app for participating, but you are now a change manager for the Swiss COVID app. And as change managers, there are a few questions we ideally ask right in the beginning of a project. And let's go through those questions together again in the Menti. So first of all, looking at the Swiss COVID application, which is actually like such apps also exist in other countries, they just are named differently there. What is this project trying to achieve? Just put in what you think, your opinion, your take on this. There's no right or wrong here. Save lives, yeah. Tracking and tracing COVID cases, awareness, prevention. Absolutely. We have a couple, reduce the spreading of COVID, definitely. Go ahead and put in whatever you think, and feel free to submit answers multiple times. That works as well. So we got mitigate cases, prevention. So what we got a lot is we got a lot of stopping the spreading of the virus, obviously, contact tracing, prevention. Got some critical ones here. Control my data. That's will be interesting. Understand the movement of people to improve prevention policies. Yes. All right, perfect. Next question. that we ask is quite similar, but let's dig a bit deeper into it. It's how can we, in this case as a society, benefit from this solution? What are the benefits we are looking at? Again, there's no right and wrong, just put in your take. Similar answers: stop the pandemic, bring awareness, security and confidence. But we got a few different benefits that we're talking about here. It's not just stop the spreading, but it's also creating awareness, enabling prevention, getting information. Yeah, there's actually, I think, the recently added a statistics button in the app, so you can even look at statistics about the spreading. Right, I think that gives us a good view to put it into perspective. For both of those questions, I ask you to give me a rating between 0 and 100%. First question is, what do you think? How much of the benefit depends on whether people use the application? And secondly, how much of the benefit will we get if no one changes their behavior? So around 25 people have participated so far. Let's give you a bit of more time. What we see, yeah. So we see like lots of the benefits, or a big proportion of the benefits depends on whether people actually use the application. And the benefit which we will get if no one changes their behavior is really, really low. All right. That looks good to me. Let's have a look at it from a bit more of a theoretical perspective. There are 4 aspects of factors that affect the return on investment of a technology project in our point of view. First is the fit of the technology solution. So is the solution that we're proposing actually the right solution for the problem we are looking at? So is our Swiss COVID app actually solving the problems that we have, like spreading of COVID-19 in this case specifically? I don't want to go into detail about that today, but I want to go into detail about the 3 aspects that will follow. One is the speed of adoption. That means the time between the moment that people start demonstrating buy-in for our solution or our change and the moment when they get up and running with it. So how long does it actually take for people to be informed and having them decided that they want to use the application to the point where they're effectively doing it? The return on investment also depends on the ultimate utilization, meaning which proportion of our target group is actually using the solution. In our case, how many people, and I would say of the 8 million or 8 million minus something, if we look at children, is using the Swiss COVID app effectively. Last but not least, the return on investment of such a technology project depends on the proficiency of our users. So how well are our individuals actually performing with the solution at hand? In this case, are people activating their Bluetooth? Because without Bluetooth, the solution doesn't work even if you have the app installed. Or do people really add the code that they receive once they get infected themselves. So we need proficient individuals in the usage of our app. So bottom line, the return on investment of a technology project highly depends on whether people change, on the speed of adoption, the ultimate utilization, and the proficiency. So what we're trying to do as change managers is we are trying to capture the people-dependent return on investment. And those the three aspects are the people-dependent ones, and only the fit of the technology solution is really technology. So the success of digital transformation does not just depend on technology. Of course, there is a technology part in it. Bad news here is, though, people don't like change. Our brains are even wired that way. So doing things differently takes our brain more energy. Behaving in a different way takes our brain more energy. And we want to survive in the end. So we are saving energy wherever we can. And this also applies to change. So resistance to change is completely normal. You're usually, as a change manager, looking at different groups that you can distribute a bit like that on this pencil. So on the one side, you got enthusiasts and promoters, so people that are liking the change in your solution and are even talking about it. On the other end, you got skeptics that don't like the solution at all, but they're kind of calmer. And you got the opponents. So those are the ones who even have the potential to erase your efforts, with the analogy of this pencil. Most importantly, though, most of your target group belongs to the wood section, the non-participants, people that will not change unless they really have to, or you give them a good reason to. So those are the ones that just sit there and wait and see. We as change managers, we want to make use of all the groups, or at least take all the groups with us on a change journey. And for me, it's interesting to see which group you are belonging to for our example. I assume a bit different of a distribution for this example than for the pencil, but let's see. Tell me which group you are in for the Swiss COVID app. Are you enthusiastic and tell others? Are you an opponent? Maybe a non-participant, so we really have to get you on board. I'd say I'm a promoter, probably. So yeah, you can see the distribution looks a bit different. And that's probably also because of the nature of this project. And it's great that we have so many enthusiasts here. All right. That brings me to what is change management really? Change management are the processes, tools, and techniques that we use to manage the people side of change to achieve the required business outcome, and in the end, capture our people-dependent return on investment. And for us to do that well and to really adopt the processes, tools, and techniques, we need to know one other thing. And I'll show that to you before we really apply our processes, tools, and techniques to our example as change managers. Organizational change always implies individual change. There's this quote of organizations don't change, but people within organizations change. So it's not the Swiss society changing, but it is actually Peter, it's Emma, it's Raphael changing because they're installing the app and they're using it actively. So we need to support individual change. What you're looking at here is the so-called grief curve that was originally developed to describe grief processes, but you can actually apply it to any kind of change process in some way. And this can, of course, be longer or look a bit different or go up and down a few more times, but this is just like the average process. In the beginning, when people learn of a change, they're usually in kind of a shock state. They're rather denying that there needs to be a change. So they're saving energy, saving brain energy, so they don't have to change. At some point, they're realizing, though, that they really have to change. So they get quite frustrated, which is followed by the so-called valley of tears. So kind of this depression point here, because at that point, people have realized that they need to change, but all the work is still ahead of them. So they haven't yet adapted their behavior. They haven't yet integrated the new behaviors into their daily life. But as soon as they experiment with it, they at some point make the decision to change and integrate the behavior into their daily lives. And then we are on top of the positive emotional reaction again. And we as change managers now, we support this process. For that, I want to use an acronym from ProSci. It's called ATCA, and I want to explain what each of those letters means. First one is awareness. So people need to be aware why they need to change. In our example, why is it even necessary to use such an app, to install it, going on using it, even if you get infected or need to isolate. Once people are aware of the need for change, we can start sparking desire within them to really change. Because just being aware that there needs to be a change doesn't mean that people are actually willing to change. So in this case, we need to spark the desire to really install the app and use it. It's a bit, you can also use the example of climate change. Like you're probably all aware of it, but that doesn't mean that we have necessarily have the desire to change our behavior. Once we were able to spark desire, and that's usually the barrier point, so the most difficult one, we can build knowledge that people need to change. Now, okay, it's like, how do you use the app? How do you download it? Do you need to put on Bluetooth? How do you enter the code once you get infected yourself? So on and so forth. Knowledge doesn't always mean that people really have the ability to change. Just because you know how it works doesn't always mean that you really do it. So we need to support people also in applying the new behavior in their daily lives. And in the end, reinforcing it, because we all know that it's quite easy to fall back into old patterns. For example, to have the app installed, but leave your phone somewhere, like at home maybe if you're on the road, and then it won't help you. So we need to reinforce the new behavior. With that, we as change managers try to facilitate the transition. We try to smoothen it and we try to shorten it so that we get people change more quickly and with less of a negative consequence of this productivity drop, of this emotional drop that you can see in the middle. And what I want to do now is I want to apply different or the most important techniques and processes together with you to our example of the Swiss COVID app. I'll go through the different processes and tools. And after giving you really just a minimum of a theoretical background, we will go into really applying it. So let's start with communication. Communication is an extremely important technique and also an art itself. So I could probably talk about that for a couple of hours. Boiled down to the most important message. For communication, we need to make sure that we send the right message to the right audience at the right time, through the right sender, via the right channel. So all of that we need to take care of. By doing that, we can create awareness for the need for change, and we can reinforce the change once people maybe have forgotten about it a bit. So in our example, I'd be interested in what you think. What could we do in terms of communication? How could we send the right message to the right audience at the right time, through the right sender, via the right channel? And also, like, what's the message actually? What's the audience? What's the channel? So we got social media here. I also see that we got 2 questions. I will in between have a look at the questions. Otherwise, we'll definitely answer them at the end of the session. Campaigns, YouTube, public communication. We have something like social pressure here also, like someone saying like, yeah, when visiting friends, you just insist on that they have installed the app and are using it. Get word super spreader on your side. It's a bit like make use of influencers. Advertisement in public places. And it's actually a big advantage in this case. We can really just use all the public space because it's in a public measure, right? Someone says, for me, the protection of my data is vital. Yeah, we will also talk about that when looking at the topic of resistance. So we have a few people who talk about data here. We'll come back to that. Zoom meetings, like this one. Explain the why. Okay, perfect. Keep on putting things in. From what I can see here in terms of the message is we need to explain why it is even important. What the benefit is that we are looking at, and that's stopping the spreading of the virus. We have lots of suggestions around the channel. So we want to use public spaces. We want to use social media to reach people. And also some suggestions about the sender, ideally using influencers or public people, celebrities that people listen to. So absolutely Swiss news here also. Great. Let's have a look at the next technique, because right now we're looking at awareness and reinforcement, but we want to look at desire as well. And here, the so-called sponsors of our change play a vital role. And we as change managers, we put up a so-called sponsor roadmap, which includes the actions that we want the sponsor to perform to manage the change. Because surprise, it's not us change managers really managing the change, but it's the sponsors. It's us enabling the sponsor to manage the change effectively. I'll talk about that a bit later as well. For us, the first question that we need to ask ourselves in this project now is who could actually be the sponsor of our change? And with that, I go to the next Menti question. Who should sponsor the change in our case? Like usually when working with organizations, it's some high-level manager, like best usually the CEO, but ideally it's a person that has an influence on everyone who is affected by the change. And oftentimes, seeing that in IT change, it's oftentimes the CTO, although the change that we are implementing has an effect on all employees and not just the employees in IT. So what we've learned from that is that the CTO is not necessarily the best sponsor for such a thing. But in our case, it's even more difficult because we don't have like a manager, but we have, I see here, health minister. So Alain Berset, I think in this case. The government leadership, yeah. And they have to be trusted by the population. I'm with you on that, yeah. Parents, yeah, interestingly, we have a few suggesting influencers and parents. We'll talk about that. We have Roger Federer. Yeah, we might want to differentiate in the next technique that I'll show you. Doctors, health leaders. Okay, I think most of you put in some kind of government or the health minister. Let me in between see which questions we have here. Mm-hmm. Let me just quickly see. Mm-hmm. So let me answer one of those questions already now. So in terms of our different groups that we are looking at in the change process, someone asked, what if I'm a user but not a promoter? You might be probably a non-participant or a promoter, because like non-participants doesn't mean that they don't participate at all. It just means they don't participate in the first minute. Like once the app is published, they're directly downloading it. Promoters are rather like that. So I mean, non-participants at some point they participate, just not in the beginning of the project. Okay. So feel free to put in other questions. We will have a look at them at the end. So we now know who should sponsor the change, but then what could we make the sponsor do? If we now, let's say Alan Berser is the sponsor here, or even the whole government, what should we make them do as change managers? And again, there's no right and wrong. Just put in your ideas and maybe experience if with that. Mm-hmm. Okay, so we got one that is paying for the marketing. Yeah, that's an extremely important role of the sponsor. They give us the budget and the resources to actually engage in the change. But at the same time, and you're all realizing that perfectly here, it's not just that. We don't just want sponsors to make decisions and to give us resources. We want them to be visible in the change and to communicate actively and even role model. So we want them to use the app themselves and show it to people. Indeed, by example, exactly. Mm-hmm. Okay, bottom line, we don't just want them to give some money. We want them to be visible and act as role models. Thanks a lot for contributing all that. So now, ideally, we've sparked some desire. And now I want to talk about a technique that is extremely important for us change managers, because the middle managers, and those can be other people as well, I'll talk about that, have the ability to support all our different aspects of the ATCA model. They can not only create awareness and desire, but they can also help us build knowledge and ability through coaching. They can coach their in organizations employees to be able to really use the new solution or engage in the change, display the new behaviors. So the middle managers are an extremely important group for us as change managers. And organizations are changing. So we still have lots of middle managers in organizations. But in our example now, we are looking at a whole society. Who are the middle managers here? And a few of you have already put that in, a few ideas in when we talked about the sponsors. So I'm curious what comes in here, because we don't have an organization, so we don't have middle managers, but this is still an important group, and this is a group that is a lot closer to our end users than the sponsors are. Alain Berset cannot just coach everybody, all 8 million people, how to use the app accordingly. Yeah, parents. I think parents we had in the sponsor question already. Employers, yeah, doctors, cantons, friends. And what is important here is that middle managers can also be people who have and influence. And this is in our society, we talked about social media, this is influencers, this is celebrities. So I would rather put, like, in terms of sponsorship, I would rather put like a kind of the government, but also, as you said, our health minister there. And for our middle managers, for our influencers, it's rather our influencers in social media, celebrities, but also friends, parents, and family. And to actually make use of their influence, we as change managers usually in our projects try to build a so-called change network. The change network includes our sponsors, but also our middle managers and other influencers in the organization. And through this change network, we try to promote the change and the new behaviors. That's working a lot better than us as change managers trying to convince and enable people. We are just enabling our sponsors and our middle managers and other influencers to manage the change well. Okay. Resistance management. I've seen a few voices of resistance already in the Menti. So you said something about like my data, and we need to make sure that this is all secure. And this is an important task of us as change managers as well. So we want to already know which resistance we might be looking at in the process, in the change process. We want to prevent it, and we want to have measures against it once the signs of resistance arise. And through that, we can further develop the desire of people to change, even for those who were maybe previously in the opponents or in the skeptics part of our pencil. So in this case, I want to ask you, which kind of resistance are you expecting? And maybe even those who put in a few voices of resistance can repeat that here. I think we need, data protection, data security. We need to, is the biggest here, data. Interesting. The question also of there's someone said no smartphone, or maybe others have also older smartphones that you cannot use the app with. And this goes to the aspect of our return on investment of the fit of the technology solution. Here we as change managers, I mean, we can probably help people, or we can engage people to buy a smartphone. But if it's not working with the smartphone they use, then this is rather a problem of the technology side and not necessarily of the change management side. Battery is actually also a resistance point from my side, because I usually I turn off Bluetooth and GPS and all that because I want my battery to last longer. Yeah, exactly. So most of it is around data security, and some of it is about like limitations of using the app. And here we just need to differentiate between what is the fit of the technology solution and what can we influence as change management, and which kind of resistance can we manage. And for that now, as you know and have done the exercise of coming up with all those signs of resistance, how could we manage the resistance? And how could we help, again, the middle managers and our sponsors to manage the resistance? Mm-hmm. Transparency, dialogue, especially with like your skeptics and your opponents. You want to have a dialogue early on, and you ideally even want to include them. Like usually what we do in our change network is we try to include those people who are most skeptic and most opponent, and we just make them work on the solutions so that they have stakes in it, right, and have participated in creating the solution itself. Communication is definitely also an important part. Here's the different techniques are interlinked, definitely. A demo. Share good, bad, and scary stories. Like maybe showing like what's the worst case that could happen with your data. I don't know whether we want to see that. Yeah, have clinics to help those who are non-technical or older people. Yeah, we need to support them, and this is already going also into the next technique. Doing Q&As, maybe doing Q&As with a sponsor, with Alan Besser. I think there are sometimes a few interviews where he's been asked quite some critical questions. Thank you. Thanks a lot. I think we got lots of great ideas here. I want to finish off with another technique that we can use to support people in their change journey. And I deliberately put that last. It's training. So usually if people don't really know what change management is, they say something like, yeah, that's communication and training. And that's, of course, like those are important components, but that's not what change management is. It's not just training, because we can only start with training as soon as we've created the awareness that there is a need for change and sparked the desire to change. Otherwise, we don't do actually the effort to tell people what they need to change. So the knowledge and the ability part are worthless. For training, I think I don't have to explain specifically what that is, but it's a lot more interesting in our example. What can we do here to make sure that people have the right skills? Because we cannot just take them all into a classroom training or a Zoom training and explain to them how it works. So we need to find alternatives. And we are doing that with lots of organizations, like trying to find alternative training strategies, incorporating digital technologies. And it's a change process in itself. So we have TV ads. Yeah, we need to make sure here that we're not just sparking, not just giving the awareness that there's a change needed, but that that the advert is as long so that we can really explain how it works. Posters. Yeah, I think they've published some posters on the website of the Federal Office of Health with posters. Here again, our ambassadors, like other people, help. It's not just learning through information like that is posted somewhere, but it's actually learning through others. Mobile companies offering free help. Starting at school, that's a good one, because we know that children are still going to school. So if we teach them, they can teach their parents and they can teach the grandparents. It's a good idea. Videos, and I think earlier on, talking about communication, we had YouTube. So you maybe want to put something on YouTube. Sending leaflets per mail. So here we are also at like communication channels with communication channels again. All right, that's great. Let me have a look what the other question is that just came in. This I will answer in the end. So that was a question concerning resistance management here, and I have to say, like, I have the same kind of resistance, right? We see, like, yeah, we are using it, but it doesn't change anything in the measures or in the restrictions that are taken. What I think is important here is to explain how the different aspects of the regulation of the spreading of the virus go together. So we need contact tracing, but just with contact tracing, we cannot really solve the problem, but we need other measures as well. And kind of in this case, probably a lot creating awareness about the forces at play. It's not just contact tracing, but this is definitely a tricky one. Yeah.
Hey, Angélique.
Yeah.
Just to have a little bit the time in mind.
I'm seeing we have like 7 minutes left, right?
Yeah, sure. We have sure 10 minutes just to have time for the Q&A.
That's great. Yeah. Thank you. And again, also please put your questions in there already. I'll just finish off with 5 truths about those different change management techniques. And they're no more than just letting you think about it and taking them with you to your daily practice. First is about communication. The sender of a message matters. And I think we've worked that out really nicely. So you know now it's not us as a change manager sending the message, but it's actually the sponsor or even our middle managers, our influencers. Next one is sponsorship is the #1 success factor in change. So when having a change project, even if you're not the change manager, make sure that you have a sponsor that is not just giving resources and budget and takes decisions, but is also visible and acting as a role model and communicating about the change. Coaching. And we've, again, like that came out quite well in the mentee questions. Direct supervisors and trusted peers are the best resistance managers. So your task as a change manager is to kind of list the signs of resistance that might arise and enable the direct supervisors and trusted peers to manage it then. At the same time, middle management is the most resistant to change. So we need to know that and devote lots of our resources as a change manager towards this group, and then also enable again the sponsor to accordingly manage them. And last one, this is an interesting one. People prefer to learn from their peers. So studies have shown that you learn most, and you also it's most helpful for you to learn through your peers, through your colleagues, through your family. So rather than investing in classroom trainings or like big digital learning platforms, build a change network and enable the change network to support their peers and colleagues in the change, then you will likely be more successful with like little effort if you compare that to setting up big training programs. All right. Before taking questions, I just want to ask you, what is your personal takeaway already? I think we only have like around 5 minutes left, so that's why. Just need to go a bit quicker. Change network. It's great that your takeaway is about the change network because we believe that's an extremely important part. Change managers do not manage change. Yep, exactly. We enable others to do so. Change is possible with the right sponsor and message. Awesome. I think we will we give access to the presentation, Tina, later to the participants?
Yes, sure, we can do that.
Okay, because then I can include also all the answers of the mentee in there. So we have all the key learnings and so on, so we can move. And I think in this case, I'll actually skip my key learnings because you put exactly that in. What my key learnings for you would have been. In the slide deck, you also find a few book recommendations if you want to learn more about change management. But of course, I'm also here, and my whole change management team at Atos is here to exchange with you, to answer your questions. So thanks a lot for listening to me and for co-creating our change approach. And with that, I'd like to take questions either from the mentee or Also from if there are any questions in the Q&A, Tina and Marine, also we can answer them there.
I think there was one question in the discussion. I don't know if you have some in the Menti as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the first one here is how like change causes stress. Yeah, because it's taking energy to change your behavior and to change your attitudes. And the question is how the stress is usually expressed in digital transformation change projects. And I can just tell you from one digital transformation change project I'm in right now. And I mean, stress is quite linked to resistance. So people just don't want to change, and also say they can't because they are busy with like doing the work the way they've done it for years. And this is exactly what we want to change. We want to change how they work. But they say they don't have time to sharpen their saw. They have to cut wood, like. So it's you usually see resistance in terms of non-participation, or even in terms of active resistance of really people pushing against it. And ideally, you involve them in your change network directly, if you can, through trusted peers again, and through the direct supervisors. Most of the time, also like in digital transformation projects, at least for me in digital workplace projects, the resistance is often also coming from people from the older generation, because they're just afraid that they cannot keep up. And what we try to do is really take lots of them in the change network and show them that they can keep up, and then role model it for the others. Why is the middle management the most resistant to change? This is because because of their position. This is first of all because they have lots of pressure. They have lots of tasks. So they have, kind of expectations coming from the top, as well as expectations coming from below. So they are in a kind of sandwich position. So the position itself is already stressful. And then currently, in the last few years, there has been so much change going on that affected the middle managers most. When it's a transformation initiative and it's about becoming agile, it could as well happen that the middle managers, the role doesn't exist anymore. So they are also afraid of losing their position in the organization. So those are probably two important aspects here. Mm-hmm.
We have another question also in the chat about sharing the source that people prefer to learn through peers. If you could share it.
Yes, I'm in the slide deck. I've actually there are hidden slides with a few also graphics and sources. So that's definitely in there. Mm-hmm. Yeah, like the question here is about past changes and how past changes influence the kind of how people adapt to future changes. And this is a big problem. If people have made bad experiences with past changes, then it's a lot more difficult to get them on board. So you have to invest even more in communication, even more with your change network and your sponsors, and explain them, of course, how is the current change different from the past changes. And one other thing is also using them as kind of an informed advisor. So asking them, hey, what didn't go right in the past? So actually, like, let's work on it so that it doesn't happen this time. So actually really involving them actively, that's always a good strategy. So in terms of time, Tina, do we still have the time to answer a few questions, or are we stopping here? I can also offer to answer some questions in written. Like, it could also work depending on your planning.
Maybe we can take one last question. I've spotted another question earlier in the chat which I think was answered, wouldn't a factor also be how many people adhere to the new tech project? And we've seen that indeed the network and the proportion of people adopting the technology or the project is actually quite important. Maybe Angélique, you can take one more question before we close, because we are a few minutes ahead already.
Yes. The others I can include. Yeah, let me choose one that doesn't take so long, because those ones are really those are intense. I will answer them in written. How do you adapt your strategies to the context and its boundaries? Absolutely. Like, I have to say, I have never been part of a change in a society, or affecting the whole society, just as we did with the Swiss COVID app. So that's interesting for me as well. What we usually do, and I haven't touched that at all as change managers as well, is a couple of assessments that we conduct even before we start our change management engagement. And there we have a look at the nature of the change. So what's the change actually, and what is changing in which aspects, and the nature of the organization or the organizational factors. In this case, this would just be the context factors, if we are looking at a whole society. And through conducting those assessments and then going into a conversation about the results with our sponsors, we try to consider the context and adapt our change management strategy to it. Yeah. Okay. I thank you all. Like, I thank you, Marine and Tina, for having me as a speaker, and everyone else for co-creating and contributing that actively. It was a pleasure for me.
Thank you, Angélique. Thank you very much for your time. When I see the positive comments in the chat, I think that the session was quite appreciated, and especially the interactive mode of communication between you and the audience, which is great to see. We'll definitely try and make that PowerPoint available to participants, because I think there are a few people interested. Yeah, so thank you again, Angélique. Thank you everyone for your participation. And we'll try to do as good next time for the next Lunch and Learn.
Thank you so much.
Everyone, have a great day.
Bye.
Bye.
Yeah, so what I will do, I'll get an export of all the Menti answers and like put them in the presentation, and then there are also the hidden slides with the sources already. So it's probably helpful.
That would be great. Yeah.